are not playing, we don't feel it. And in fact, if we keep doing what we're doing, we are not going to the operating room, he's going to the operating room.
Let's get to two misconceptions about Tommy John surgery. We'll start with this, and this is something that you spoke about last week on the air. The parents who have taken their children to doctors who are not exhibiting any symptoms of injury and telling them, open him up, he'll throw harder on the other side. And a lot of people here have heard this.
Well, that's the misconception, is that guys have Tommy John surgery and they come back throwing harder. And parents think that the surgery makes you throw harder. The surgery only corrects a flaw. That's all it does. And then your training and therapy and all this, that makes you throw harder. But parents believe that the surgery makes you throw harder. And they want a perfectly healthy young kid. Yeah, he's going to need the surgery down the road. Let's have it done now. And my thing was, I don't know how Dr. Ahmad feels about it. If a doctor consents and operates on a healthy kid, he should lose his license right then. That is absolutely, yeah. That's my opinion.
I've had parents ask me that, Ed.
Really?
We're working with these teenage all-stars in East Cobb County. I said, what, are you out of your mind? What the heck's wrong with you? You can look at the Atlanta Braves over the last 3 or 4 years. They've had 3 pitchers with 2 Tommy Johns within the last couple of years. 2, and now they're out. They're not pitching anymore. 2 in 3 years, something like that, right, Doc?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to say something in turn over to Dr. Ahmad, but there's a lot of good science out there now, from major leaguers down to youth level. And again, as Dr. Ahmad said, it's not a 100% chance of returning, it's 80% chance. The parents who walk in think, do the surgery, I got a 100% chance of being as good or better. It's an 80% chance of returning. And when you return from the surgery, the doctor is trying to, and therapists are trying to make it as good as it was naturally, not Superman thing. So basically, the best solution is to avoid it. And if you have surgery, it's only an 80% chance you're going to become who you were supposed to be. You know, we remember all these major leaguers who made it back, but we forget about the 1 out of 5 who didn't make it back. And I've read a lot of science about that, but there's one interesting, the most interesting study I read was by Dr. Ahmad. Why don't you tell them about that perception where you interviewed the different people?
Yeah, I was spending so much time in the office talking kids and parents out of surgery because they have normal MRIs and normal exams, that it came time to understand the scope of this problem. So we surveyed parents and coaches and the kids themselves, and we asked them some specific questions. And when kids were asked, should you have an operation in the absence of injury, Tommy John surgery, 50% of kids said, yeah, I'll have that operation in the absence of injury, suggesting that I'll have this so that I could get forward. This got picked up by the media. They were calling it the next steroid, that is going for surgery when it's not indicated. And then we talked about abuse and overuse. About 30% of parents did not realize that it was this overuse, this fatigue that could lead to the problems. And even 25% of our coaches didn't understand that it was this overuse and fatigue that can result in this problem of injuring the ligament. So once we understood that there's a sensationalism about the operation, we went and took it a step further, and we asked our media, the people who report on baseball, either by radio, television, or writers, what they understand about Tommy John surgery. 50% of the media believe that it is an enhancing operation, that after you have the operation, you are better afterwards. And these are the people who, every time a guy gets on the mound and has had the operation, they have to say he had Tommy John surgery. In fact, I had one of my research students start to count with a clicker, like a pitch count, how many times they reference Tommy John surgery during an individual game. If you Google Tommy John surgery, you get 3 times as many hits on that search as you do for ACL reconstruction. And ACL reconstruction is so much more prevalent in all of our athletes across all of sports. Tommy John surgery only happens in baseball players. So there's something about this situation that is extremely alarming. That gives us an opportunity to start to educate. And I'm just going to pick up on what Leo said one more time. The complement of people who are involved in the baseball pitcher is different than any other sport. They have a whole host of people that they rely on for advice and for steering and for guidance, from their parents, grandparents, coaches, advisors, therapists, and so on. And this concept of network, the baseball health network, is something that we're working towards, so that everybody gets on the same page. And when we're all on the same page, we're going to help them. And I think that's the best way to move forward.
Glenn, number of players that play, let's say from 12, 13 on down, it's about 3.5 million worldwide?
I believe so. I think that's how many play Little League Baseball.
Little League Baseball is
Right.
3 million.
In that company, Little
Yeah.
League Baseball.
Okay, and this is what I tell parents. 3 million kids play Little League Baseball. 750 play Major League Baseball. Do the math. What's your kid's chance of getting from there to the big leagues? Infinitesimal. So just let your kid, maybe he'll be an attorney and he'll be a Scott Boras agent, make more money.
1 in 15,000 Little Leaguers will get a day. A day. Not a Jeter career, not a Mariano career, a day in the major leagues. Doctor, you were talking earlier, Dr. Ahmad, about the youngsters and how this has trickled down to youngsters, the surgery has. That it used to be limited to major leaguers, but in a recent 5-year period from 2007 to 2011, 56.8% of teenagers have had it. And this gets to the mentality of it. If I have the surgery, now I'm a real pitcher.
Yeah, there's this cavalier attitude about, let me throw until it blows out and then finally I get the operation. Sometimes I'm talking to a patient and their family and I start to bring up the solution if it is in fact injured, and I start talking about the operation. They don't care about the details, where the incision is it going to hurt afterwards? They start texting. They may be tweeting, I'm not sure what they're doing, but they're letting everybody know that they're finally getting the operation. I often get asked, what's the youngest kid that you operated? What's amazing about this is, it used to be that the injury to the ligament would happen at a young age. Maybe 11 and 12 is about the youngest. But these are super physiologic kids, they just matured early. But what's happening is, some of these kids, the growth plate is the weak link. And before they can injure their ligament, they're throwing so hard that they break their growth plate, and then we got to fix their growth plate with a screw. So the youngest age for fixing a throwing kid's elbow is about 7 or 8 now.
Ron Darling told me they never rest. They never rest. Leo, your pitchers after the season, they rested. You were able to avoid injury by and large year in and year out. You'd bring them in January for
Right.
Camp Leo,
Right.
before they went down to when they were at West
Yeah,
Palm.
we brought him in early because Bobby and I got to Atlanta in June of 1990, and then during the wintertime, we got some pitching in place to develop these kids. And the Dodgers are out in Chavez Ravine.
Right.
They're working out, and we're sitting here on our butt in Atlanta, so Bobby and John Sherrills gave me permission to bring our top guys in, so we would have like a 10 to 12 day period before we went to spring training where the guys would throw. We would go 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, under control, just getting the kinks off, getting the dust off for the wintertime. Then they were able to throw batting practice when they got to spring training. Because if you look at spring training now, nobody throws any batting practice anymore, but and you got to face hitters. It's a different look than they are practicing on the side. It's a completely different look. So then, what we did too, Ed, was this. Whatever we did in April, we did in October. In other words, we didn't deviate from start to finish what we did. The routine always changed the same. It was always the same. The worst thing you can do is when a major league team, say for example, a pitcher's healthy and he's pitching well, they shut him down for 10 days because this innings limit's catching up. The worst thing you can do is shut him down and then start it back up again.
Oh, I would have loved to have been near you when the Washington Nationals announced that they were
Well,
going to put
I was on
Strasburg in the closet.
between the lines, you know, and they had my face on one corner, they had Scott Burrows on the other, right? So what happened was, they said, what would happen? I said, that was absolutely ridiculous. There was nothing wrong with him. You have a chance, and look, I always put the pitchers first. My longevity only depended on theirs, and I told them that. And that's why I did everything I could for their longevity, because I knew if they stayed there, hey, I would last too. But years ago, or not years ago, but just a short period of time ago, pitching coaches got fired if you had too many guys breaking down. Now they're getting a pass for some reason. I mean, what they're explaining what happens with young kids is part of it. But anyway, we never broke our routine, and it never changed whether it was April, September. And any time you get a pitcher on a routine, he knows when he's throwing, he knows when he's not throwing, but once again, more often with less exertion, instead of less often with more exertion.
Leo, I'm living in Jersey, going to spring training. It's colder than cold. You know where, for my pre-spring training workout, I put some mats on the floor. I got down on my knees and I took a tennis ball and I threw against our concrete wall. Boom, and it bounced back to me. And I'd stay down there for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. And we got to spring training. And Mark Connor, the pitching coach, said, have you been throwing? I said, yeah, I threw against our basement wall for about 2 weeks. And he said, what? And I said, well, look, we're going to throw a week, 10 days of batting practice, right? Yeah. And then we're going to have 4 weeks of games. If I can't get ready in 6 weeks, and after, I said, I've got to do something else with my life. But now, you said it right. We had a thing, you go 2-0 on a real good hitter, guy that's up there like that. And you said, throw him a BP fastball. These guys have no idea what a BP fastball is because they don't throw BP. And I've seen them throw BP. BP to them is get the batter out. That's not batting practice, that's pitching practice. Throw the ball in there, and you'd be surprised. Just throwing the ball over the plate. They don't hit the ball out of the ballpark every time. They pop it up, they hit ground balls. And you see what you can do at throwing about 65, 70% power. These guys don't hit the ball. I mean, the odds are against them to start with. But they think batting practice is they're out there to throw 30, 40 pitches, top speed, to embarrass the hitters. Come on.
Listen to this, Tommy. The pitcher's going out, okay, it could be a youngster, it can be an older. Okay, you're going to throw 2 innings today for your first outing, and 2 innings and 30 pitches. So say somebody goes out there and throws 2 innings and throws 12 pitches. Do you take him out? Of course you do. You know why? It says innings or pitches. And innings means throwing an inning, sitting down, and going back out and pitching the second inning. Okay? Then now let's go to the other end of the spectrum. 1 2/3. He's got 30 pitches. I'm going to give him an out or two. Why do I want to take a pitcher's going to feel mentally not well walking off of a spring training game? Okay, coming out. So you give him you don't abuse him, but you give him an opportunity and add 5 or 6. Come on. I mean, it's based on common sense. Okay? So therefore, that's how you use your pitch counts when you're just first getting started, whether you're a youngster or whatever it is. It's common sense.
Smoltz wants to ban the radar gun in youth sports.
God bless him.
Yep.
Smoltz says that 15 years ago, if you had pain in your elbow, you pitched through it. Now, Dr. Ahmad, there's pain, they shut him down. Now we've got, in New York, we've got Syndergaard is on anti-inflammatories. Steven Matz, we learned this morning, has a bone spur in his elbow. 4/5 of that rotation have had Tommy John surgery. Here we go.
Well, here's the challenge, and that is young throwers, we'll talk about young throwers first. Young throwers have to throw, and they have asymmetric differences in their upper body. That is, they develop increased external rotation. Their arm goes back much further on their throwing shoulder than on their other side. That only happens if they throw, and if they throw during areas of their growth, usually between 12 and 16 for men. If they don't acquire that increased external rotation, they don't have the articular or the rotational motion. They don't have enough of a launch pad to develop velocity. So one of the hardest things I deal with is an injured player who has no external rotation. It's non-modifiable. There's not an operation that gives you more external rotation. So they have to throw when they're young. And that adaptive change, there may be some soreness that happens during that period of time. Our job is to understand what is soreness and what is pain, and what is a dangerous situation and what is not dangerous. I don't have the perfect answer for that. We work with a lot of pitching coaches. Steve Hayward's here. He deals with hundreds of kids every week, and he can tell who's having pain because they're changing the way they throw versus somebody who's having a little bit discomfort and they dial down the intensity, but they don't have a complete shutdown of throwing and have to start from scratch. So, and in the adult athlete, and when they're playing at the highest level, these players are assets. And when it's an asset to a club, there's a sense of we have to avoid something that could be a problem to our asset. And one of the easiest ways to do that is shut it down, do a complete evaluation and assessment so we don't damage the asset. There's much more at stake when we're dealing with a high-level athlete.
And I got a good story for you. We have a number one pick coming out of high school. Doctor, you'll appreciate this. He comes out of high school with a fastball, breaking ball, and split. And he's 18 years old. So he's being told that we're going to take away the split because you want your arm to develop, and so we just go ahead and throw your fastball and breaking ball. The reason I'm saying this is because the organization asked me after they told him this what I thought. Anyway, so they take away the split. Now he's facing the toughest competition he's had to face in a long time. And he doesn't have a bullet that they've taken away from him. Because they say a split hurts your arm, okay? Which is a fallacy. It's how you throw a baseball, period. The other thing is, now what does he try to do with the fastball and breaking ball because he doesn't have his split? He tries to resort to super power, super control, and what he's doing is, what the organization is doing is the opposite of what they're trying to avoid. So if a young pitcher comes out of high school, or if he has pitches, and these pitches are released in a relatively quiet fashion, okay, which you try to teach that whether they're this high or that high, then those pitches are okay. But they took away a pitch from him, and now he's trying to look, you take a 12-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 21-year-old, a 30-year-old, what's the first thing a pitcher's going to resort to when they face adversity for the first time in a game? They're going to resort to super power or super control, or both. Three bad things happen. Super power will elevate your fastball. Super control will get you behind an account, and both of those things will raise the risk of arm injury. I don't care what age you're talking about.
To Dr. Fleissig, teenage pitchers are judged on the showcase circuit by gun readings, not competitive victories. And according to your American Sports Medicine Institute, pitching more than 8 months a year increases the likelihood of injury 3 times. Averaging more than 80 pitches an outing increases the injury likelihood 5 times. And high velocity increases the likelihood of injury by 2.6 times.
Yes.
Those are stunning numbers. Those are just those are stunning numbers. How did you come to those calculations?
So that wasn't just arbitrary. We did research. We did a few studies. We followed some healthy kids in the field and we studied them. We also asked some questions to some who came in for surgery compared to some who didn't come in for surgery, and we came up with those conclusions. Just getting on to what these guys were saying, yes, we don't want them to always. A lot of our research showed that too many pitches was bad, and then when we came out with the recommendations, we said too many pitches is bad, and then Dr. Andrews was insistent. This was about 1999, 2000. We also have to say the radar gun is bad. And I'm like, but the research didn't say anything about the radar gun. We have research about curveballs and fastballs and pitch counts, and he insisted 15 years ago, we got to say the radar gun is bad. And I thought, well, you know, he's the boss, whatever. We put in turns out he was prophetic, he was right, because what's happening now is, as Leo was saying, pitcher success is not, whoever has the fastest radar gun speed doesn't win the game. Whoever gives up the least runs wins the game. And so there's a society now, a culture now, where the youth baseball players and the parents think the way they're going to get signed to go to college or to go to pro baseball is to have the highest radar gun speed, not the lowest ERA or most wins. Unfortunately, that is true in a great extent. So a lot of the blame is on the college and the pro teams as well, because I don't know what Dr. Ahmad would say, but I've talked to a lot of the general managers and stuff, and if you have two pitchers you're trying to consider drafting, they both have the same ERA, and they rate them on different things about how good their statistics are, how good their personal makeup is, character, how tough their competition was, whether in high school or college, competitive league, and what their radar gun speed is, and also the quality of their mechanics, which is very important. The truth is, the scouts and the teams that are rating all these things, the pro teams or the college teams, they're giving a score to how good their mechanics are and how good their stuff is in the ERA, but there's a lot of guesswork on that. The radar gun speed is not guesswork. If that guy threw 88, he threw 88. So the teams, the pro teams and the college teams, in my opinion, are overemphasizing the importance of that one factor because they feel most confident in evaluating that part. So basically we have a situation where the amateur baseball players are playing to light up the radar gun, not to win the game. And the teams that are drafting are unfortunately putting too much emphasis on this. So I think it's going to be a pendulum, and the pro teams are going to see if you do have two pitchers with the same stuff, but one has a higher radar gun, maybe the one with the less radar gun speed has the higher chance of success because he has a higher chance of staying healthy. So right now the pendulum is towards having a good radar gun speed, but through medical or through the teams, we got to shift it back and de-emphasize the radar gun.
How do you do that?
The teams are not going to, the major league teams are not going to do it because I said so or whatever, but they have to do it because they have to get burned a few times. They have to sign some hot prospects who are throwing too hard, too fast, and they look great, and then they blow out, and then they have the guy who had the good stats who threw 88 or whatever in college and has a long, successful career. So they have to essentially learn that, and I think that is going to happen.
Think about the way it was. Warren Spahn pitching every fourth day through 17 consecutive seasons of 200 or more innings. He had 2 seasons within that of 300 innings. Gaylord Perry had 15 consecutive 200 innings. Don Sutton, who Tommy played with, had 15 consecutive seasons of 200 or more innings, never missed a start. Phil Negro, Greg Maddux, and Mark Burley had 14 years of 200 or more innings.
You know what all those guys have in common, Ed? They have great touch on the ball. If you watched how they threw a baseball, there wasn't any overexertion. It was like a very firm release on the pitch, and it was a firm release on whatever pitch it was. There was no variations on their release. And they were able to repeat their mechanics over and over and over again. And so all those pitchers that you named, you can't say one threw 95 miles an hour, or whatever, And I think that's what you try to do as a coach, is to teach this controlled effort. And Johnny Sane used to tell me, Leo, the word that you use all the time is be firm. You don't just power your way through. You be firm with your fastball, firm with your breaking ball, firm with your change of speeds, and motion plays a factor in getting somebody out. And I remember Tommy saying he had to drop down a couple times. Well, guess what? The hitter hadn't seen that. Now, people say, oh, that's old school. No, it's not. That could be done today if taught from the right way. And I'm not old school either.
When Sandy Koufax was with the Dodgers, he had a great fastball, but he couldn't win. So one day they're going to spring training on a bus, and God, I forget the catcher. Norm Sherry. That's exactly who it was, Norm Sherry. They come up, he said, Sandy, when you throw batting practice, guys can't hit you. You're just out there, boom, just throwing like this. Let's pitch this game today like you're throwing batting practice. And Koufax went out and pitched an outstanding game in spring training. Well, from then on, Sandy was an outstanding pitcher because he wasn't trying to throw max effort all the time. And it took a catcher smart enough to see that, and it took a pitcher smart enough to believe what the catcher said. And but that's not done now because, you know, he won't, Sandy still threw hard. I have no idea how hard he threw, but he threw harder than guys could swing. And the other thing that made him really good was that curveball would start up about at their eyes and they would end up at their shoe tops. So now he throws that fastball in the same zone, and the curveball right there, you got to decide, fastball, curveball, boom. And if you guess wrong, you know, he throws it by and strikes out 15, 16 guys a game.
Do guys who have had Tommy John surgery ever contact Tommy John?
I've never had one contact me. Never had one. It's amazing. Now, if Tommy John were going to have Leo Mazzoni surgery on my left elbow, I would call every pitcher I knew or my agent knew that had that same surgery, because that's the way I pitched. I want information. If I have information on the hitters, then I can assimilate it in my brain and I know how to pitch it. But I would want to know. Nobody has ever called or ever said, "What did you do on your comeback? What did you try to do? What should I look for? What are some of the pitfalls that I have to look for?" And the one thing Dr. Jobe told me, listen to your body, Tommy. He said, your body will tell you what you need. When I was coming back, if your arm doesn't feel good that day, don't throw a lot. If it feels good, really funky, don't throw. If it feels good, throw. And, you know, but he said, your body will tell you what you need. Guys don't listen to their body, and if you told a pitcher today, listen to your body, they wouldn't have a clue of what you were saying.
And I had a farm director call me one time. He says, Leo, he says, you've had such success with healthy pitchers through the minor leagues and the big leagues. Give me your first 4 or 5 days of work, what you do in spring training. I got to the 4th day, and you know what he said? We can't do that. So what the hell are you calling me for? You're telling me you want my information, but you can't do that. And I haven't had one pitching coach or one major league organization ask me, how did you guys get through those 14 years like that? Not one. You know why? They don't want to know because they haven't figured it out for themselves. To be honest with you.
Tommy, you said that surgeons need to ask the guys who've had the surgery, how much did you pitch as a kid and how often did you pitch year-round?
Well, I think that's just information that I think Dr. Ahmad was talking about that and Glenn was talking about that. And I think that the thing that you're finding now is you're coming up